Today on Fortnite, I got second place. I was so close.
Mom, will you get me a snack?
Mom!
It's time for adult conversation. With me, your host, Brandy Ferner. Hello, and welcome to episode 1. We're going to get right into it today and say the things that most moms won't as we take a look behind the curtain of motherhood. My guest and I are going to be talking about what surprised us about this job, specifically what I didn't know would bring me the most rage, and shockingly, it's not being someone's snack bitch. We'll also be talking about the need to be seen and understood by our partners and why that's so damn hard sometimes. We will talk about dad privilege and what it is. And we'll also talk about how to better communicate with our partners to mitigate some of that rage and resentment, and also to get our own needs met by something other than self-care. Imagine that. Someone else having a stake in your well-being. So grab some clothes to fold, a dishwasher to load, or go ahead and just lock yourself in the bathroom and enjoy this episode of Adult Conversation. My guest today is Jessica Chapman. She is somebody who I met through doing birth work. Surprise. That's, I feel like, how I've met so many of my core wonderful people in my life. So to me, you are the person that I can say anything to. And we often leave each other messages where we're crying about whatever is happening in our life. And then the other one listens to that message, which then makes them tear up, or maybe I'll just speak for myself.
Yeah.
And so we talk real talk about life and motherhood and marriage and sex. And I know from my end, I always appreciate and feel like there is zero judgment from you. Like our brains work really similarly. So we're kind of the same person.
Right. You're essentially a mirror. If I just want validation, I just throw it to you because it's like having a conversation with myself. So it makes me feel a lot better.
Right. But it's like a self that isn't going through the thing. So it's like a self that can be sympathetic, because that's how I feel about you. Like, you're not going through the exact thing maybe I'm going through, but you're responding like I would if I was detached enough to have a good sense of what's happening.
Exactly.
Yes. Jessica, tell us, what do you think the listeners need to know about you?
I think what's most important is where I am in this moment. I'm coming from a pretty jaded, rage-filled place in my life. So if you're not down for that, you should push pause. I just recently, in the last 6 months, maybe less, left my life in Southern California, left everything, walked away from all I had built in birth work, et cetera, for an amazing opportunity for my husband and our family, and relocated to New England. And in so doing, lost all of myself, including childcare, which
is 99% of yourself.
Right. So, there's a lot of rage that comes from tearing down, like, who am I? Who am I when I've got nothing, and everything, all at once.
Oh.
So,
Wow.
So I'm in the trenches of motherhood.
Yeah, I feel like you're in the perfect place for what our topic is today. Yeah, it's like it couldn't be more perfect, Today I wanted to talk about with you specifically, because we talk about this all the time anyway, but we could talk for days about it. But I want to talk about all the things that we don't talk about, or most people don't talk about, most normal people don't cry to each other about on WhatsApp. And, these are some of the things of motherhood that you don't know before you get into it. I like to call it behind the curtain of motherhood. So I think motherhood is this interesting thing that when you're an audience member watching this production called Motherhood, how it looks as an audience member and how it feels as the director who gets no breaks, no intermissions is really different.
Yeah.
And there's so many facets of that. I mean, this could be like a 2-day summit. I mean, it could be like a 2-year summit, really.
Right.
There's so many pieces, but I just want to talk about the pieces that today that feel like they want to be talked about. And It's funny that you were saying rage because I have a list of notes and rage exclamation point is one of them. So I'm curious, and we'll talk about, I want to talk about this getting lost in who you are. But first, what was one of the things that surprised you most about motherhood that you didn't know was going to be part of the job?
I think in this moment with slightly older children, so I'm not in the newborn stage anymore, the piece that you just cannot comprehend, when you, like pre-children, if you were out at a grocery store and you saw a mother losing her shit at the kid, you'd be like, oh my gosh, she's so impatient. All she needs to do is X, Y, Z, right? Like we were the best parents ever before we had children.
Right.
But it's what you don't understand, the behind the scenes, behind the curtain, is the constant needling that goes on that brings you to your knees, the nonstop, never having a moment to yourself. So by the time you lose your shit in the grocery store, like you've had years and years of somebody just fucking with you constantly, not letting you use the bathroom by yourself. You can't get a shower by yourself. Everybody's hungry all the time. So for example, yesterday, I'll just give you an example. Yesterday, I come home, I've had this chronic sinus infection going on for, only like 3 months now. And I just was done. I just had a day, doing all the things to make my kids' lives amazing. Took my little guy to his first ski lesson. We had this great day, but the day just keeps like going and going and going. And I come home.
Yeah, why do they keep doing that? If the day ended at noon, it would be great.
Can we submit a request to make
a petition?
Petition to make the day stop at noon? That would be fantastic because I am an amazing mother from wake up.
From 8 to 8:30?
Let's be honest, not wake up. I'm a great mother from the time I've had my second cup of coffee until about lunchtime. And then if we could just peace out, it'd be amazing. If I could spend the rest of the day in bed with a book or taking a bath, that would be fantastic.
Oh my God, yes.
So instead, I get home and I just in my mind, I'm like, okay, we're going to put on a movie. We're going to just chill I'm just going to have a minute before I have to start cooking dinner because, people are always hungry.
Right.
And my dog got into something and while I was gone all day, vomited 3 times on white new carpet because who was I thinking that I could have nice things? And then took himself up the staircase, took a dump on this oriental rug.
Oh, for the love.
And so this is what you don't understand is like they just break you. They break you. So I'm Googling how to get dog poop off oriental rug when all I want to do is sit down, and I'm 2 hours of cleaning. And the entire time I'm doing that, the kids are like, I'm hungry. I need more snacks. He's whatever. Nick did this to me. Max did that to me. Like someone is always needing something from you, and so you do that day after day, year after year, and it just breaks you.
Yes, that's exactly right.
That's the piece that I think I had no clue in my mind. Like, we'll go to parks, we'll do fun adventures, we'll learn French, whatever. And the reality is they just break you. The mundane moments of each day that build up, just the day-to-day that has to get done to run a house and to run a family. It just breaks you. It brings you to your knees.
And that's why, the mom who's having the meltdown and losing it on her kid at Target, it's like, that is, take her oldest kid's age. And then that's how many years of frustration is coming out in that moment, likely. It's like the build up. I mean, obviously there's probably parents out there who get frustrated, and show that often, but I feel like there's this group of us. I actually feel like it's most parents. And we've talked about this, but I feel like most parents are trying to not say the thing that they immediately want to say, but are trying to say the thing that's more loving, that actually uses a teaching moment, all this stuff that, it's like we're trying to be our best parent. But there's moments in which we can't, and it's I kind of love those moments because they're so real, right? In which you can't, it's like you have pushed me to my edge so far that I cannot even try to have a spin on this so that it's, So there's something that we learn about it, or I'm kind. I can't even show kindness right now because I'm so at the end of my rope.
Right.
You and I are clearly the same person, because when I was thinking about what my most surprising thing is the constantness of it. I just, it's like you have your baby and then they feed so much that it's like within a couple days, you're thinking to yourself, I didn't realize they could eat this much or need this much. And it's quite different with a newborn. For me personally, I loved newborn stage because they ate one thing. They didn't have snacks yet. I feel like snacks alone it could be like one of the hardest parts of motherhood for me. But on top of the constant nature of it, the buildup of all the pecking, that happens on a daily basis, the questions, the resistance. I mean, I didn't realize. I knew that there would be sleepless nights. I knew that, babies woke and to feed, in the first year or whatever. I knew that was a thing, but I didn't realize how much kids and babies don't want to do the thing that will keep them alive. So the amount of resistance that goes into it, like the resisting of eating, the resisting of sleeping, of napping, of putting on a coat, of putting on pants. I mean, these are the stupidest things, but they're what our whole day is filled of. Yeah. And then, and then you add that on. I mean, the saddest thing happened the other day. I saw this on one of the Facebook groups. There was this new mom who posted a picture of her newborn, like laying right on her stomach. And she was like, my baby is 5 days old and it only wants to be on me and it only wants to nurse. And I'm so exhausted. I don't know what to do. What was interesting and so sad is most people were like, hey, read about the fourth trimester. It's totally normal. Babies want to be close to their moms. That's where they've been, for 9.5 months. But there was this one lady who posts something like, yeah, it's tough. I have 2 kids and I really didn't get a good night's sleep for 14 years. But hang in there,
Oh my God.
And I was like, oh my God, this woman is going to jump off a cliff.
She doesn't know how she's going to make it till tomorrow. You don't say 14 years right now.
Exactly. But the thing is that's the truth.
Yeah.
That is the truth. And that's part of it it's like the hardships that you hear about parenthood, you think they exist in the newborn stage or in the toddler stage. But this friend of mine at school just had her 3rd baby and her other 2 kids wake up more than the newborn. It's like the fact that can happen. And I mean, so many of us know this reality is you think that there's like these finite times of some of the hardships or, specific challenges with sleep and behavior resistance. But it's like, oh no, it continues. It doesn't stop.
Right. And it changes. It's like constantly morphing what's hard with them and what isn't. And then, what's causing the sleepless nights changes. The last few years before my daughter went off to college, it was like, she's out and I want to be in bed and I'm not sure she's home safe. So that would keep me up. And it just feels like it's always something for sure. And that's the other piece is when we talk about these little things that like will break you in the course of a day, add that on to being sleep deprived and you don't have much resilience, like it just doesn't take much to crack you.
That's right. And I mean, we're not even talking about the health crisis on top of it. And when I was working with families doing doula work and birth work, I mean, I have to say that I would see these couples and it was so beautiful to be a part of the birth and to get to witness that. And there's just so much like life-giving yumminess in that. And also, I would always think, especially, later in my career when I wasn't so new and I'd had 2 kids or whatever, I would look at these women and think, I wonder what autoimmune disease she's going to have in 6 years when she hasn't slept and she's been pecked to death all day and she's lost herself. This seems to be a little bit of an epidemic that women, our bodies just like cannot handle. They cannot handle having it all, this notion of having it all. So I think you're so spot on. And I think that all of those things added up, the sleep deprivation, the losing yourself. If you have any health issues, which I have not met one person who doesn't have one these days, especially moms, it's like, it's all too much.
Mm-hmm. It is. I think we're in a place, it makes me wonder, what's happening to motherhood in general, but I feel like we're just all a day away or one more sleepless night away from just falling to our knees and saying, like, we can't do it. We cannot do it all. And, I think that's another piece when you say this having it all, that I think we've been fed a line of baloney that, we really thought we could do it all. So most of us, most women you meet now who are mothers have an education, had a career, had something for themselves, started a little bit later in life. We're having babies a little later in life because we're doing more for ourselves up front, thinking, then I just add this baby into my life and I keep trucking. And we all are realizing, like, it's impossible. We still have all the responsibilities of motherhood and trying to do something for yourself.
Okay, I feel like I need to say, it's easy to listen to something like this or to have this conversation and to think, what a bunch of complaining. Don't these people love their kids? They should be grateful to be moms. There's people who can't be moms or people who've lost babies. And I feel like you can hold both things. Like, I think it's just inherent. We all know how much we desperately love our children. Oh, yeah. Otherwise, we wouldn't be trying to be the best that we can to do it all. Otherwise, we would just go like, fucking, I don't care. But instead, we're trying to do our best for them. But you can love your kids fiercely, and you can also criticize the job that you took without knowing all of the parameters. I mean, I think sometimes about this job of motherhood and fatherhood too, but I mean, we'll talk about that in a second. It's kind of some of the differences. But, we took this job from many of us from a really loving, hopeful place that was really naive, and rightfully so. If we weren't as naive, like, we might not have kids. Yeah. But when you think about it on paper, that we signed up for a job that we knew really nothing of what it required, and it's a lifetime appointment, and you can't ever quit it. Right. So that's the piece. So I just feel like that needs to be said, because I think that there's, some people who can just go, I don't like all the negative energy. And that's not what it is. It's more of we need to say the things that we feel. And I feel like most moms feel a piece or all of what we're saying. And the positive stuff about how fun it is to be a mom and all the cool things that you can do and the crafts and children are amazing and all of that, I feel like that's represented. Represented. But I feel like this side, which holds those two things at the same time, I feel like is not very represented.
I get that. I get that some people don't want to hear it. What I think we need as mothers is a place where you can share the rawness, because it's kind of like a faux pas. And, you and I, we speak our minds in a way that can be offensive to a lot of people, I guess. But this is like the opportunity to be honest about, hey, it is not all butterflies and rainbows. Okay. And like, what must be given in order to do this? What must be given up of yourself, of the life you thought you would have? Sure, you may 100% hands down say, I would do it over and over again. But there still was something that had to be given that deserves to be spoken to.
That's exactly right. And these snuggles with our babies, they aren't free. Like, we earn them. There is like blood must be spilt, milk must be spilt, like we should be able to talk about that hard part without it being attached to how much love we have for our children. And I feel like this is such it can be such an isolating experience that if you don't feel seen and you don't feel heard, it feels even more isolating. And the truth is that a lot of us have sort of like a built-in resentment, and some of us realize it and some of us are able to talk about it and some of us aren't. And I remember when my son turned about 4, and I remember just all of a sudden feeling like, and I said it to my husband, I said, okay, you haven't done anything specifically, but I have a lot of resentment towards you. And I want to talk to you about it because I don't want to have it. And I don't want to feel this way. And really what it was, and he was like, because he's awesome, he was like kind enough to listen to me and to have, to be able to like have that be sort of okay. But it wasn't him specifically, even though it was, but it wasn't. It was just like the framework of how this works. And so, this other part of losing our identities, one of the other parts of motherhood that surprised me so much is I didn't know what it would feel like to choose to be a stay-at-home mom, or to choose with my husband that I was going to be a stay-at-home mom for, at least the first couple years while they're little. And then to watch my husband return pretty quickly back to his old life while mine was completely turned upside down. I didn't realize how angry I would be about that. And I think there's many of us that don't realize that. And then we feel this weird torn feeling of like, well, my husband didn't do that. Like I chose that, or we chose that. Right. But I also chose it without knowing the full scope of things. Sometimes when I think about it, that if we didn't have kids, my husband's life would look really similar to how it looks right now with kids. He would probably have a similar job that he loves. He would probably go on runs like he does. He'd just the day to day would probably not be that different. And then I look at my life and I think if we didn't have kids, would my life be different? And it's like every fiber, almost every moment that I fill my life with would be completely different. The only time that it would be similar is from like 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Mm-hmm. That would be the only time that would be similar. But otherwise, the living to take care of other people, I would probably have a different job. And not to say that that's what I want to do, but it's a little bit of a mind fuck to realize that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's also important to mention that like you and I really lucked out in the husband department. Like, we both have husbands who are super involved fathers and listen to us and validate us and all of that. We have strong relationships. And so this is in no way like dad bashing or husband bashing or anything. Right. But back in my former life of being a childbirth educator and preparing parents, when we were discussing postpartum preparation, it's what I like to call the I'm going to go for a run theory. So now here's the thing, like after you have a baby, this is to no fault of your partner. It's the inherent nature of being the person who gives birth and then has this tiny human that was inside your body and is now outside your body. But say it's a Saturday morning. This is what I talk about with what I used to talk about with my clients. So it's Saturday morning. This is like when you want to think about how your life might change. If before you have a baby, you want to go for a run on Saturday morning, you just go for a run, right? Like you put on your clothes, you go for a run. Now, after you have the baby, your partner can be like, hey, babe, I'm going to go for a run. And they just go for a run. And it's just assumed you take care of the baby. They don't ask like, hey, is it all right with you if I go for a run? Or, how about I do this and then you get to go do something later, right? It doesn't work that way. But if you want to go for a run, and a run is just like plug in anything for the run, anything you want to do that doesn't involve a baby, right? If you want to go for a run, you have to ask permission, essentially. You have to like find somebody to take care of that baby. So all of a sudden your life is not, you have no autonomy anymore to make decisions for things that would feel good for you to do for you. You now have to add in the step of, first of all, it's hard. And this is another thing you don't understand until you've had kids. It is hard to ask for something you need that requires help from others. Right. It is hard to say, you know what, I really need a little something for myself. Can you please hold the baby so I can take a shower? And people will say like, oh my God, how is it hard to take a shower? We always hear moms talking about it's so hard to take a shower. Well, if you happen to have that baby who doesn't like to be put down.
Yeah, you're never showering again.
Sure, you can take a shower. But again, back to like nothing is free. You can take a shower, but you have to hear your baby scream. Or you can take a shower, but you have to call a friend to come help with your baby or ask your partner to help with you, right? So it's I want to go for a run theory. Their life doesn't change. They can always go for a run.
It's exactly right. And this is one of the other things that I've struggled with. This idea of autonomy I mean, I never even knew what that word meant until I had kids and then didn't have autonomy. And then I was like,
oh, have it anymore.
Yeah. Cause I was somehow I came across and I was like, that's what I don't have anymore. Like that word has been important, for me, but it's like, I feel the rage even saying this, building up, but it's the asking for permission. Like, so, and we all come to motherhood in different ways. You know, who we were beforehand affects how we are as mothers. So for myself, I was independent. I mean, I grew up as a latchkey kid. I did so many things for myself. I grew up with this idea that like girls can do anything. And so I was the kind of chick that like could change a tire and shoot a gun and like do all this really masculine stuff. And so I wasn't the kind of woman who was like, oh, I need a prince to take care of me. Like I did my own shit. Like, I mean, even to this day, like I do our taxes. I do a bunch of the masculine stuff in our relationship. So you take somebody like that and who has just, you know, has had agency. I mean, everybody has agency, but take somebody who has agency in their life and all of a sudden you turn the tables. So I found myself exactly like what you were talking about. I found myself asking my husband if I could shower. I mean, and I know we all do. This isn't just me. This is what happens. And it's this fucked up thing where, you know, you're asking this person who has no power over you or you know, like when my husband and I got married, I mean, you think you're equals and you are, and then you have kids and it's like all of a sudden, even though you can have the most woke husband on the planet, which I feel like I possibly do. And yet this is just how the, you know, this is like the gender inequality of parenthood and just sort of how it is. But, you know, if you're feeding a baby for hours, you know, like you said, like they can just go for a run. They can just get a shower. There would be days my husband would get 2 showers and I didn't even get a shower because he'd have to shower before his run and then after his run. So he was getting shower, run, shower. Right. I mean, how do you not silently rage inside? And it's like, I didn't even know why, because when you're sitting there with your baby, you're like, oh, well, I'm so happy that he's doing something for himself that's healthy. And I mean, why I would have him not run just so that he could sit with me? I mean, no. Right. So that's what's so messed up is it's like, it logically doesn't make sense, yet it makes all the sense in the world.
Yes. And I think it makes sense why we build resentment towards them, even though we know logically, like he didn't do this to me, right? He's not, he didn't single-handedly snatch a shower away from me. Right. It's the nature of, I have this newborn that needs me. And, and even in the most 50-50 relationship, you know, when you have a newborn, it's not equal. They need you more. You know? That's right. And so him getting a shower, he's not doing that to me. Right. And yet I feel rage at him because he is just, he is showing me what I can't have.
That's right. Oh my gosh, just flaunting. It's so funny that you say that.
Flaunting his fucking shower at me.
That's exactly right. So, you know, what's so funny is my mom, when my kids were like in the stage where they were still waking up all night and I was nursing them, when my mom would come to visit, which was quite often, she and my husband would always do this thing. It was like this comedy routine, but they didn't know they were doing it. But they'd always do this thing where they'd be like, oh gosh, I'm so tired. And they would both do it in front of me. And at some point I finally said, do you know what you guys are doing? It's like you, and this is like the most bizarre analogy ever, but I'm like, it's like you went into a room of people who don't have arms and you said, oh, my arms are so sore. Like, right. I'm like, do you understand? This is like abusive, you know? Yeah. And then my mom would always be like, so how often were you waking up last night? Like, it's like it's not that she didn't believe it, but it's like she wanted data. So when my second came, she had a Fitbit. My mom had a Fitbit, you know, one of those like step trackers, sleep trackers, whatever. And she was like, well, why don't you sleep with this? And let's see what your sleep is like. I'm like, motherfucker, like what? But so then I finally did it one night and I tell you, It was so glorious the next day. I was like, data, motherfuckers. Look, from this time to this time. And you could see, I mean, I was up every 2 hours or some shit, but it's like, yeah, I digress.
Yeah.
But the being having it flaunted at you. I mean, even
in your face.
Yes. And even, I mean, you know this, all of us with partners, that drive away to go work, watching them get in the car. I mean, sometimes, because the kids want to wave goodbye or whatever, sometimes watching them get in the car with a fucking smile on their face
and a cup of coffee.
Yes. And then like getting their music queued up or the podcast they're going to listen to. Yeah. And, you're like, of course you're happy. You get to leave this, this place.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I feel like this brings us to something. Yeah, we're on this track anyway, but so there's this idea that I don't know that if I came up with it, but it's something that I've thought of a lot, and it's on the same lines as this idea of dad privilege. And again, this isn't to husband bash. And this also, it's just this inherent thing. Again, it's not something that they're doing to us, but it's this built-in privilege. It's the shower. It's the run. It's this idea, like you said, that just is so triggering to me, but is so true, which is whenever we want to do something for ourselves, we always have to think of the child care first. Yeah. Like that's always, in order to do that, you have to set that up. Whereas I feel like we are the child care, the built-in safety net for our partners. So it's like that aspect of it is part of dad privilege. But I think what happens is in the beginning, the babies, newborns need us so much. So it's like new fathers and new mothers, but new fathers get set up with this idea that, oh, she takes care of the baby. And I get my run and I get my shower because the baby starts out the most needy. And then that never changes. Like, so even though the baby changes, like the dad, his foundation of what fatherhood is was built on the baby needs her more than me. And so I think that that's problematic. And I know I do my best to be really open and honest with my husband about what I need, but it's amazing how many years it can take to even understand what it is that you're feeling as a mom, like where the resentment comes from, that it's not specifically attached to him, but it's attached to, motherhood or the framework of this. Or maybe there are some people who it is specifically attached to him. But I mean, I just recently had a conversation in we're 12 years into parenting but it goes back to like the first day, which is I said something to him about, honestly, it was about the run. It was totally about the run.
It's always about the run. About the run.
Because it takes you apparently it took me like a decade to kind of understand what was happening. But I said, in the morning, because the thing is he asks to do things, like, hey, is it cool if I go for a run? And so
okay, can I push pause for a second?
Yes.
Okay, because my husband does the same. And that came out of all the rage-filled conversations we've had.
Exactly.
Right? So he always tipped up like, hey, babe, would it be okay if I was thinking I could head to the gym or I could go for a quick run? And he's gotten a lot better because here's the thing. Like when you get set up like that, who can say no? Like, no, don't care for yourself.
Right.
Right?
That's exactly it. And that's what becomes so confusing is even with a question, you're put in a position of, okay, I'm going to be a dickhead if I say no, because, and that's maybe not, that like he needs to have his time too. But then if I say yes, I'm pissed. And so I realized what was happening there for me was that he would go for his run, which was like about 2 hours, which is, but which is like, great for his well-being and all of these things. It's like, okay, so I get that. But then what would happen is if I wanted to have time for myself, we were already in the day and it was on a weekend. We're already doing the family thing. So for me to get out is harder because by the time he comes back, it's lunchtime. And so
and now the kids are like, they're hungry. They want to go do something. They've been sitting there waiting for dad to get back for the run.
Right.
It's time to do something as a family. Yep.
That's exactly right. So what I said to him is I said, Gosh, I still, even talking about this, I still feel torn because I feel like there is this voice in my head, like, am I just an asshole? But I mean, I don't think I'm an asshole, but I said to him, you know what? The reality is that it is hard for me to get time for myself, like your run, like, so that's 2 hours of alone time that you're not running errands. You're not doing something for the family. Like, you're just on your own doing your thing. And I love it and I want to support it. But I also want to feel like I'm getting a similar thing for myself, but the day happens after you get back so that I don't ever get that. And I said, and to be honest with you, it's hard for me to carve that out. So I said, you know what would feel so much better is if you said, hey, I would like to have a run today. So can we find a time to make that work? And then also, what do you want your 2-hour break to be? And when do you want to take it?
Mm-hmm. Yes, because then you don't have to ask for it.
I know. And so that's what I told him. I mean, again, it's crazy. We've had this conversation before, but so it's like, wow, we're still at 12 years, having kids for that long. We're still having it. But I said, here's the thing. I don't want to have to ask you. I don't want to have to beg for time away. I would love for you, when we're talking about the day, like when we wake up in the morning, let's have a conversation that's like, hey, so what does our day look like today? Rather than the first thing that happens when we wake up is you ask if you can go for a run, because immediately I'm put in a spot where I'm torn and feeling frustrated and conflicted. But I want and I think that this is one of the biggest things, is I want my well-being to be part of your job, just like your well-being is part of my job. And that was really helpful. And I feel like made things a lot easier with us, because this is the whole thing with self-care. I could do an entire podcast on how much I mostly loathe self-care. But that's the same thing as like having it so that we are the only ones who are thinking about our well-being. Yeah. I'm not here for that. And that's what was at the bottom line of this conversation with my husband about the run. Is
because it's one more thing you have to do.
Yeah, and you have to fight for it. You have to find they got their space carved out. They're going to go. They can just jet. But now I have to find a space that works with the family, and then I have to carve it out, and then I have to ask you, my husband, who somehow 12 years ago became my master. Yeah. I have to ask you if I can do it. And I mean, I guess the same thing could be said for him asking, is it okay if I go for a run? I mean, it's not totally one-sided. This thing happens back and forth where we all of a sudden have to ask each other. But built-in dad privilege makes it so that I feel like dads feel that less, because so much of what they want to do is just sort of inherent. But I feel like knowing that somebody, and I said this to my husband, knowing that when you wake up in the morning, instead of just thinking about yourself, you're thinking about like us and my well-being and your well-being and how we manage all of that. That's what I want, because that's constantly what I'm doing for every member of this family. Yeah. But I sometimes feel like you're on this like autopilot for like, oh, I want to go for a run. I'm going to go for a run, but you're not thinking about the bigger picture. Mm-hmm. And that I feel like is a big difference to plan your day like that. And all of a sudden I was like, it's so dumb, because I even said, even you bringing up, well, so when do you want to get your 2-hour break? I said, even you saying that is like validates for me that I deserve that.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. I recently have started, we kind of, we've gone through phases of this. It's like phase 1 is complete rage and stuffing it deep down inside, right? For how many years?
Oh my gosh, right.
Then you realize like, oh my God, this is like, there's all this resentment that's built up, and he hasn't like done anything to me. He's just the outlet for my rage. And what I'm really angry about is not him. It's the inherent inequalities in parenting, right? And this life that I never realized was going to be like this. So anyways, that's phase 1, is just the deep down rage. And then you start to have the conversations, you start to try some different things out, but it feels like a lot of the early stages of trial still require us to make the plans or carve things out or ask for it. Yeah. And so my most recent thing has been, an example is last weekend, just having the assumption that my time will happen too, without asking for it, without, okay, here's an example. Yeah. So we have the Y here is like the big gym in town. And it's actually fantastic. So they have a kids club, which is amazing. The kids can go rock climbing. They can run laps on this track, right? But of course my kids hate it. They don't want to go. They say they hate it. Every time they go, they love it, but it's a fucking nightmare. So it's a lot, if we all want to go to the gym at the same time, we have to the payment is kids that are yelling and freaking out. So I find out that they had open swim hours, and my kids love to swim. So they had open swim hours last weekend. And I'm like, hey, why don't we, instead of dropping them off at kids club, like my husband wanted to get some cardio in, but he had a haircut like after the gym time, right?
Okay.
So the first thing he says, because dad privilege, is like, great, I can swim laps while the boys play in the pool, right? And then he gets his cardio in. Well, has anyone noticed that the default is that I'm the one keeping them alive in the pool, right?
Oh, exactly. Right. Yep.
So, and it's just, this is the piece that's like the intangible is like, the assumption is mom is always the one on duty.
Right.
So instead of like this whole conversation, this whole thing about it, I was like, okay, great. So we have an hour before you have to go for your haircut. Let's split that up. My new favorite workout is sitting in the sauna, by the way. So I'm going to take my sauna time for half of that. Would you like me to take the front half of that or the back half of that?
Oh my
right?
God.
So, but either way, I'm getting my sauna time.
Yeah.
For me, it all comes down to being seen.
But this is exactly why I think this is so common and so problematic. I mean, especially in a day and age where, a lot of women becoming moms are educated, or, as you're saying, we're becoming parents later. So we have this version of ourselves beforehand. You get married and you have this person that you feel that you're an equal with, and you live life. You're both like on your careers, and you're both, moving up in the same sort of way. And then all of a sudden you have kids and they keep moving up, and then you take this total detour. And so this person that you talked about work together and career, and you had a life that was so similar. I mean, it didn't even matter that he was male and you're female. You're basically living the same life. And then you have kids, and it's like all of that crumbles. Yeah. And all of a sudden he doesn't know what your everyday is like. And you remember what you kind of know what his everyday is like because you sort of had it, before you had kids. But I know I felt like this huge isolation. He will never know what it's like to day in and day out do this job. I mean, not even just like for a year, but for like 18 years,
Right.
There's a certain amount of years in which, like I'm finding around 10 years is when it starts to like really chill out a little bit. But it's like, okay, so for a decade, I'm going to have to show up to this job every single day. And it's going to bring me to my knees every single day. And I don't get an out for that. And he's never going to know really what that feels like. And my husband specifically is like, loves being with our kids, like just loves every minute of it. I call him Disneyland dad. I don't even know if he knows that, but they have passes to Disneyland, him and my two kids, and they go and they have a blast. And I'll go once a year, but I'm shocker, I'm not Disneyland mom. He just like loves it. So it's like, he rarely ever has the moments that I have, but I'll tell you, he's had a couple moments where he's had the kids all day, or, for me to do the things that I'm passionate about, he gives me time, which is amazing. I mean, it's funny. In one hand, it's like, it's amazing, but it's also like the same thing I do for him. So it's like, this is the thing. I feel like I have to talk about it in this super grateful way. And I really legitimately am grateful for all that he gives me, but it's like, but why is it like that? It's a total mind fuck. It's maddening. But he had a moment where he was, it was like a month ago, where he was with the kids all day and they were driving him bonkers. And so after bedtime, I came down and he was like totally at the place where I am, where I'm like, I'm going to drive the van in the ocean. This is ending today, where you're just like, you're nonverbal for like, the first 5 minutes you're sitting with the person and he's just like shaking his head. And then he's like trying to they fought over a balloon for like 5 hours, just, and I'm just smiling, and I'm like, I'm so sorry. And I just sit there and I let him vent it out because I just know how it feels. And I'm like, I'm so sorry all this happened, that you had this day, and I'm sorry I'm smiling. But like, it proves to me that you're normal and that this is hard. So, but if you don't, but if your spouse isn't around, you're, having these days with your kids, it's like, how do they ever see you? How do you get your spouse to see you?
I don't know. And I think, maybe is the problem that like they just can't. They just can't unless they happen to get a window into it. But even these days where they get a glimpse of the reality of it, that's one day. I guess maybe we're crazy for thinking that or having an expectation that they could possibly understand in their bodies what it is like the day in and day out for year after year after year. They just can't. They'll never experience it.
So then, I feel like then the question comes up for me, which is, so then how do we sustain our marriages in a situation where you go from being really connected, living the same life, thinking you can have it all, thinking that men and women are equal, to having kids and realizing that was all bullshit, to then like sort of rebuilding this new marriage that is where you're not super connected in all of those ways. And yet you have to find ways to connect. I mean, I feel like so many moms in this phase of motherhood, like where you have like a 8-year-old and up, because you've been in it for a while and you are questioning this. And this is where I see like a lot of divorces happening. I have these conversations because it's out of a place of wanting to make good choices and wanting to be able to sustain and keep the things that I love, like my marriage. So then I want to know, like, what do we do in order to help this? And because I think I'm over communicative, my husband and I have worked through a ton of this kind of stuff. I just think about all the moms out there who haven't even realized this rage and resentment and like really where it stems from. And I think for a lot of women, their husbands are not helping, who are clueless, like not even showing up for just like the basic stuff. And those are not happy. Those are not happy situations.
So first of all, I think this is the piece where, like, sure, this could come off as complaining, but this is why it's so essential. Because if this is bottled up and you are experiencing this and you're not venting it anywhere to anyone, like, it will snap. You will break. It's just, when are you going to break?
Exactly.
Right? And most of the time, I think it breaks the marriage. It breaks the relationship because you're holding all this resentment. They can't see you. You never talk about it. And one day you just can't take it anymore. Right? And it's irreparable at that point. So I feel like my husband and I, we have a really solid marriage. And what has helped is that, one, we've communicated throughout. So there's been no question. Like, my husband has not been blindsided by the fact that I feel rage.
Right.
He's very aware that I'm feeling rage. Right.
Right.
But in so doing, in having those conversations, I'm able to step back and see, like, okay, I'm angry at him or I'm feeling resentment towards him, but he is not necessarily the problem. Like, I'm able to separate the two.
Right.
Like, he represents all that is bullshit with motherhood.
Yes.
because it didn't happen to him. Right.
Right.
So that's one piece, is like, I think if you don't have a way to communicate, we all communicate differently, but if you're not able to do that with your partner, you're kind of screwed. Right. At some point it will come up. And then the other piece is that we have made it really important, a part of the foundation of our marriage since, our first together was really young, to like find ways to come together in something that is just about us, that has nothing to do with the children. So the goal is that we still like each other when the kids leave the house.
Exactly.
Right? That we still have something in common. And that's hard to do, right? I mean, and it's not all, make date nights happen, because, not everybody has the money to pull a date night together, or the childcare available, or the energy. So, sometimes in those early days, it was as small as like 10 minutes of just sitting and talking to each other after the kids went to bed before we fell asleep.
Right.
But, I think the biggest thing that keeps me from like hating my husband, where I think it could be really easy to do that, to feel that kind of resentment, is that he does want for me to be me. He does want for me to be equal, and he wants to see me. Like, he tries so hard. The dynamics are just fucked. Yeah. Right?
That's the thing is, you even have somebody who really wants to do that, and it's still hard. So imagine the people imagine the husbands that don't want to do that. Yeah.
I mean, we all see that. We all have those girlfriends, and you hear the stories, or you witness it in action, and you just think like, oh my God, I don't know how I don't know how you sustain this. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like one of the things that's been really helpful, and maybe I guess one of the upsides of the over communicating aspect of my being is I think men generally need to be told how to help. So, we're always thinking about everybody's well-being. And so we're always like one step ahead. This is a generalization, of course, but we're one step ahead. I mean, that's one of the other things about motherhood that I'm like, oh my gosh, if somebody told me I was going to try to be diffusing a bomb all day for 10 years, being this one step ahead of what the next need is going to be so that I don't have to hear crying. But I find myself with my husband when I'm able to articulate exactly what it is that I need, it's like he needs clear instructions. Because some of this stuff he's not wired for, and some of it he is. He actually has quite a bit of like a feminine sort of energy about him, and he was raised by his mom and grandma, and yet he's a man. I've learned that I have to be honest with him about what it is that I need. Kindness while doing that is always appreciated. He wants to feel like he's appreciated. I try to do my best, and I'm sure I could do better about, telling him when I appreciate the things that he does. But I mean, again, this is one of those pitfalls, which is your husband does something that's sort of something he should be doing anyway, as part of an equal partnership in a family. And then you're like, thank you so much for doing that. Yeah. And then you're like, and I shouldn't have to thank you, but I will because it will make our marriage better. But it's like, there's this whole other piece of it. My flaw is he's like, hey, you need to just like give me some slack here. I'm not going to be doing this whole thing perfect. And so just like, give me the benefit of the doubt that like, maybe I'm trying, maybe I'm not executing perfectly, but maybe I'm trying. And so like I hear him on that. And so I've been trying to be better about that. But I also feel like one of the things that's helpful is to be having these kinds of conversations with friends so that you can get some of that energy out without having to vomit it all over your spouse, and to kind of, which you and I do so often, is to try to figure out, well, what's really happening here? And you and I are both trained in the way that we do childbirth education and working with families. We're trained to help try to suss out what's really happening. So we do that for each other. But I feel like that's such an important piece of friendships when you become a mother, is like, you have to have somebody to pick these things apart with, so that you can kind of figure out like, well, what's really happening here? Because there's a difference between the framework of motherhood makes it so that my husband and I feel more disconnected and it feels unequal. And that's something you can work through. Or is really what's going on is your husband is a disrespectful asshole who doesn't think you deserve equal rights. Like those are two different things, but they can feel the same way.
Yes. I meant to mention that, and I think it's so critical, is having that sisterhood with somebody who is in the same place, who gets it, where you have an outlet for it, with somebody who does understand it in their body, what it feels like to go through this every day. And that's a piece that I can't expect that my husband will ever understand. He may be able to listen to me and let me vent. And of course, he'll want to try to fix it somehow, because that's what men do. But I can WhatsApp you real time in the moment about whatever just went down and feel validated and feel heard. And then that leaves me in a better place in my relationship, because I've already been seen and validated and heard by somebody who gets it. So, our husbands, our partners, they don't have to be every single thing for us. Getting your needs met in a healthy way by someone else.
That's right.
Then there's less of that buildup, I think.
Yeah. I realize that, not everybody is good at communicating. Not everybody is up for what might be a potentially intense conversation. Some people, I think many people, just want to avoid it, which is why you see these marriages where there's just so much passive aggressive stuff going on. And nobody's ever going to sit down and just be like, hey, let's talk about this, which would be that's always where I go to, is I would rather be open and honest about what's happening than play these little games, which I feel like has served me and my marriage really well. But there's some people out there, that's the way that they that's the way that they work. I mean, I imagine there's people listening right now who are like, yeah, that's how I handle it, or this is kind of like the relationship I have with my partner. So I think having, like what you're saying, is having a friend or a group of people that you can talk to about this open and honestly without feeling judged. I mean, the last thing, and this is why I love you and I feel like we work so good, is there's never going to be a time that you send me a message about a hardship and I'm going to say, you should enjoy every moment. And, but isn't it amazing? Or any of that kind of stuff. Like, I'm never going to be that. I'm never going to be the tone police for you on that.
Likewise.
Yeah.
Likewise.
There's always the mom or two that's just, you're having a real conversation about something, but who wants to bring it back to, but we wouldn't trade it for the world. And it's like, yeah, that's why we keep showing up. Is because, we wouldn't trade it for the world and we love them. And I'm just, as a mother, going to inherently know that you feel that same way about your kids. And I'm going to hope that I feel that same way about my kids. We're not talking about that. But, I think some people do live in that more, they want to be in that rosy place, and that's fine. And there's plenty of outlets for that. And I mean, I feel like there's moments of where, we get to that place of, oh my God, I had a really fucking good day the other day. We know it exists, but we have to talk about the other stuff.
Yeah. I think our society in general has a really hard time with the darker side of life and experiences. And, people always want to just put some cliche on it. And it's somebody's grieving something. It's like, it's really hard to just hold space for them to be upset.
Exactly.
We want to say, it's going to be okay. You'll forget about this in however many years. And we do the same thing to mothers. And I think it's doing us a disservice to not just be able to hold space for the darkness, to just feel the pain of what we've given up, how hard the day to day is.
Yes.
We have to have somebody in our lives that can hold that for us. And, when you get that, it makes it a lot easier to go enjoy the park afterwards. Right?
That's right.
Better yet, go to the park with somebody who can hold that for you. And while your little blessing is in the swing.
Exactly. Join us next episode for part 2 with Jessica, where we delve even deeper. That's what she said. Okay, so a topic that we have to tackle is sex.
Sex or lack thereof.
We will tell it like it is. And I tear up for the first time, which I'm surprised it took 2 episodes instead of 1 for that, but hey. And if you like what you've heard, please subscribe to the Adult Conversation podcast and maybe even mention it to a friend who needs her rage validated. Thank you guys so much for listening. Good luck out there.
Here I am back at the goddamn Zoom.